It's time for Firearm Friday, a podcast dedicated to bringing together the firearm industry and community. Now here's your host, from the great state of Texas, the tactical leprechaun himself, Chris Dover.
Welcome to the show. I am Chris Dover, and this week we're going to talk to a really awesome lady. She is a firearms instructor, and that would be Avery from Skip's Tactical Solutions. But first, let's talk a little bit about Sportsman's Guide. Now, surely by now you've heard about Sportsman's Guide. Heck, their first catalog hit the streets in 1977, so they've been around a while, dealing in outdoor items and outfitting all of America. So whether you hunt, fish, you're into maybe firearms, archery, whatever it might be, jump over there, check out what they have to offer. You can also join the club, save even more on your purchases there. Sportsmansguide.com. All right, here we go, crew. We have Avery on the line from Skip's Tactical Solutions. How are you, ma'am?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
You bet. Now, you were at hit on some recent events before we go into talking about your projects and a little bit of history and stuff like that. Let's hit on some recent events first. You were at NRA. You made the NRA this year, I see.
Yes.
And
it was good to see you there.
Was that the? Yeah, it's always good when we get to meet up with others out there in the industry. It's always awesome. Was this your first time for NRA, or had you been to NRA before?
That was actually my first time.
Okay. Now, was SHOT Show your first time?
Yes.
Okay. All righty. So you're the rookie. You're the newbie.
Oh yeah.
What did you think of NRA compared to SHOT Show?
I personally liked NRA better than SHOT Show. Mm-hmm. It was nice to be able to meet the consumers and the people who actually follow you and support you versus it just being strictly about business.
Mm-hmm. Right. And did you feel that the atmosphere was a lot more laid back, a little less business driven than what SHOT Show seemed to be? So a little more fun. I guess not that SHOT Show's not fun, but I guess NRA, relaxed is the right word. It's just a little more relaxed.
Yeah.
So, and hopefully you were still able to accomplish a lot. I know we did.
Oh yeah, I got a lot of footage. I took some film while I was at SHOT, and that was kind of my first time being in an event like that, and it was time for me to get comfortable. And some of the companies that I met, I was able to see them again at NRA. So I did a lot of shooting shooting video while I was at NRA, and I was a lot more comfortable.
Right. All right, and that's what it's about. Now, other than SHOT or NRA, had you been to any of the other trade shows or done any media type work at gun shows or anything like that in the past?
No. Okay. I've been to a handful of gun shows, and just the ones here that were local.
Right.
But I recently, when I started my business a year ago, I had a couple of booths. Okay. And it was just really kind of out of my element. I feel like at the gun shows, people kind of want something for nothing, and all the products that I sell are quality products, so I'm not going to give them away. So that wasn't really the place that I needed to be.
Yeah, I understand. And so you've never done anything like that from a media standpoint, I'm guessing?
Mm-mm.
Okay.
Nope.
Okay. That's something that's interesting. I've done a couple, and I know some smaller channels that have done quite a bit of that. It's a pretty good place to start out if you're not, if you don't have the capability to go to NRA or SHOT Show or something like that, because it gets a little bit of that experience under your belt, which I think is kind of what you're talking about. It seems like you learned some things at SHOT Show, you went into NRA and was a lot more comfortable and kind of applied the things you learned and just had a little better time with it, sounds like.
Yeah.
Now, as far as your background, let's get into you a little bit, if you don't mind. And the first question that I have is, it revolves around what everybody calls you, right? Because you get called like 15 different names, it seems like. I'm used to calling you Skip, But then, if you go on to other people's show, they call you Avery, and then it's like, okay, so does it matter to you, or is there a preference?
No, it doesn't really matter to me. On a daily, I get called Skip because my last name is Skipalis.
Mm-hmm.
And so, in the military, everyone calls you by your last name.
Sure.
And that's the name of my company is Skips. So everyone kind of just rolls with that. And some people don't know that my name is Avery, so they just stick with Skip. And some people are like, I just rather call you Avery. So whatever they want to call me, they can call me.
Sure. Yeah, I understand. Just don't, what I always say is it doesn't matter what you call me, just don't call me late for dinner, right?
I know, right?
We're good. Now, as far as your background growing up, obviously military background involved, and I do want to get into that just a little bit, talk about that stuff. But before that all happened, was there any role that firearms played in your life? Where did you fall? Some people grow up hunting, some people grow up with competitive shooting around them and that sort of thing. Was there any involvement with firearms at an early age for you?
Absolutely not. I grew up playing with Barbie dolls. We never even talked about guns, and we played outside.
Wow.
No firearms involvement at all.
Right. And so with that, what was what sort of prompted you to make the move to the military?
I actually wanted to be a cop.
Okay.
Believe it or not. And so someone told me that the safest way for me to be a cop would be to join the military. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, okay. And he was a civilian cop, so I just decided to join the military. And I wanted to travel, and I wanted to get an education. And when I graduated high school in 2003, the economy wasn't really that good. So I saw a lot of people who had degrees, and they were applying to work at restaurants. So I decided I didn't want that to be me.
Right, exactly. Now, 2003, that's interesting because that's kind of right after 9/11. So was there anything with that played into the psyche when you were joining up at all?
Yeah, I wanted to be part of the solution and not part of the problem, and I just wanted to be able to protect.
Mm-hmm. Right. Now, somewhere along the way, obviously, as long as you have been enlisted now, I guess you could call it career at this point, correct?
Oh, yeah.
What changed from I want to get in, do this, and then get into law enforcement to, okay, I like this, and I want to go career? Was there a change that was made at some point? Was there a turning point there?
Yeah, I had been active duty for about 4 years, and not to sound cocky, I was just really good at my job, mm-hmm. and I wanted a challenge. Right. And I came to the point in my career where I could make a change, and I wanted a skill that would be really beneficial. And there's a lot of trades in the military that are beneficial, but I wanted a challenge, and I wasn't very comfortable with guns, and I just really did. It was an experience that I really didn't like. Mm-hmm. So I decided, why not do that? That would be an awesome skill to have, and I could pass that knowledge on to others.
Right. Now, what was that job that you transitioned from?
I transitioned from being a cop, working in certain jobs, mm-hmm. into being a firearms instructor.
Okay. Is that almost like an MP or?
Yeah. Air Force, we call them security forces. I think Army, they would call them military police. Mm-hmm. But I was doing that, and then I transitioned into being a firearms instructor.
Right, the actual instructor. Yeah, that's interesting. So even though you joined up, firearms were not really a big part of it, and then so it sounds like even during your first few years there in the military, firearms really, other than being a part of the job, so to speak, weren't really.
Oh yeah, there was nothing extra about it.
Right, really wasn't a passion for it.
No.
And that's interesting that the passion built through you challenging yourself, I guess, is what you're saying.
Absolutely.
Which is interesting. It's not like you made an active decision that, I guess you weren't really looking for it to become a passion, right? You wanted to excel at that particular task, and then from there, I guess it kind of became a passion, or maybe an obsession, some would even say.
Yeah, and I've always been the type of person that a lot of people like to tell me what I can't do.
Right.
And so, just by looking at me, a lot of people would judge the book by its cover, and
Right.
they would go, oh, well, because I had people tell me I wouldn't be able to be an instructor and I wouldn't be able to do this. And even when I went through the school, I had challenges.
Hmm.
So it was something that every single time someone would say I couldn't do something,
Hmm.
I just made it my job to show them that I could do it and I could do it with a smile.
Now, was that more of a stigma because of your size? Because much like myself, you're a little person, um, or is
No,
it?
we're going to call that fun size.
There you go, fun size. Or was it more the female thing?
I think it was both.
Okay, okay, that's interesting.
And I'm a real girly girl, so I have my nails done, I wear makeup, I like to smell good, and those are not really the attributes of someone that typically works with firearms.
Hmm. Right,
So,
right.
yeah.
And why not? That's what I say. What difference does it
Look, now it is.
make? Right, right, exactly. So you talk about the challenges as you went through that. Are there any specific ones that come to mind that you had to overcome with the actual training and becoming familiar with the different firearms and techniques and that sort of stuff?
Yeah, one of the things that really stick with me is when I first started working in Air Force Special Tactics, I was a girly girl. And these are guys that are, going in, kicking in doors. And I've really had to learn how to be able to teach that type of personality and then be able to not take offense when someone just doesn't want to learn from me.
Right.
And
Gotcha.
it's not because of my skill. And then just over time, I would have to prove myself. But for me, it just made it that much better that I proved myself and that they saw it. And I'm not really one to be loud about anything. So I don't have to argue with people or be loud. I can show you better than I can tell you.
Right.
And so then they respect me that much more because they actually saw how hard I worked and how good I was at my job.
Right. Yeah. And sometimes you just have to leave people be. There are misconceptions and stereotypes and stigmas and whatever. That's their issue.
Oh, yeah.
And there's not a lot you can do about it. So you just kind of got to not let that get you down sometimes.
And every single class that I went to, I want to say was kind of a challenge because a lot of the times I would go to these classes by myself. So when I became a Glock armor, it was like, okay, I'm the only girl in the class. Okay, I can do this, and it wasn't something that I was familiar with. So I'm already, out of my comfort zone, but then there's really no one that I know there, and then I'm the only female. And then it was Glock Advanced Armor, so it's like, okay, here we go again. And then FN and SIG, but it just, every time I accomplished something, it just made it even better. So it's like, okay, the next one I go to, yeah, I'll probably be the only female, but I'll still kill it.
Right. Now, when you first started into the whole training and all that stuff, was the potential of you being the only female, was that something that even entered your mind? Were you at all prepared for that?
It's not something that I ever really thought about. In the military, females, we are the minority. And I never really think about how much of a minority we are. But am I in the job of being a cop or security forces, you're the minority still.
Wow.
So,
Right.
It wasn't something that I actively thought about. But when you're the only female, you actively think about it.
Right, right. And I'm guessing with all of the training and classes you've done, it's just become second nature. You're used to it now, and it's duck off of water's back. I'm guessing at this point, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, from transitioning from the all of the training and everything in the military over to taking that into the civilian market, when did that happen, and how did all of that come about?
It happened early 2018. I have 2 children, and the Parkland shooting happened, and I had people talk to me before about training. Hey, do you teach people how to shoot outside of the military? And it's like, no, I don't really have time. And for me, I don't know if you've ever felt like this, like people, regardless of if they know you or not, they're constantly asking you the same question, and I didn't really actively shoot a lot outside of work because that was my daily job,
Right.
So after so many people asking you, it's like, okay, then why are you not doing this?
Right. Yeah.
So when the Parkland shooting happened, I'm just going to be honest, like a higher being told me that I was being selfish by not sharing my skills with the civilian community. And so I saw we had someone who was professionally trained. We don't know how much training they had, but maybe that person lacked the confidence to go in and eliminate that threat.
Mm-hmm.
So I felt like if I could share my skills with people in the civilian community, then that could be one more male, female, or even a child that would know how to better protect themselves if a situation ever occurred.
Mm-hmm.
So I decided, and then I would see other instructors on the outside, and they just really, so I'll just be honest, I have very high standards.
Right.
And I've been groomed to be a certain type of instructor in the military. We have checks and balances, and some of these instructors, I'm pretty sure there's no checks and balances,
Right.
because the student doesn't necessarily know what the teacher should be teaching.
Right.
They don't know what information they're missing. So I just felt like there was such a lack of quality instructors out there that I had to share my skills, and I just have a unique personality when it comes to teaching people, that I need to share that with the civilian community because maybe more people would be able to see themselves in me or want to take a class. And even if I was able to teach one person and they were able to get the confidence to be able to protect themselves, then my mission would have been completed.
Well, it sounds like that, when you made the transition into training in the civilian world, you kind of had an idea that you were going to do it your own way, what that own way, what your own way was.
Yes.
And that, you were going to do it better, I guess, in a way. So backing up just a little bit, I mean, you mentioned your kiddos. As far as your family goes, what role do firearms play in the in the family and the household? Are there family fun days, or are the kids into the firearms at all, that sort of thing?
So my kids do like to shoot. They don't get to shoot as much because a lot of my weekends are spent teaching classes. Mm-hmm. So there will be times where they'll actually go to the class with me, or there will be some range time, but they don't really shoot as much. But my kids they're trained, and it's not as fun as it is on video games. And my kids I have 2 boys. They're 10 and about to be 13 soon, and there's a huge difference. It's heavy, it's loud, and it's not something that they do all the time, but it's definitely something that they enjoy. And we should probably start to do a little bit more of it because they enjoy it.
Right. Well, I mean, you could potentially. It's always going to be heavy and loud and sweaty and tiring and things like that. But hot because you are down in Florida. But there are certain scenarios, and especially when you get into certain competitions and things like that can have a really similar feel to a video game. But I think it's great that they're into those video games. Plus, they've got that realistic training with, what those firearms in those video games are actually capable of doing in the real world. I think that's really important, and a dynamic that's a lot of parents just set their kids down in front of these video games without giving thought that we need to make sure that the kids understand these video games are not the real world.
Yeah, I know.
So
I felt like that was really important for me to show my kids because, video games take the humanity away from a lot of things. And if you're able to respawn 5 times, then, a child who doesn't know any better may think, okay, I can point this gun at this person and they're going to respawn if something happens. But I tell my kids, if you point at certain places, like once you put your finger on that trigger, it's over. Like those are things that you can't take back. So, we don't ever play with guns, and guns are tools. They're not toys. And they're just educated on it. And I thought that was important because I want them to educate other people on it.
Right. Now, as far as getting into some of the specifics on the training, as far as the curriculum development, is most of that modified from your military training, or did you incorporate some from maybe other instructors that you've kind of followed and admired, or how do you get the course curriculum for that laid out each time?
A little bit of both. It's what I've experienced in my military career, but it's also relaying that into civilian terms and then civilian courses that I went through as well. I've been through a lot of advanced shooting schools, so they have so kind of meshing the two to find that perfect way that you can pretty much tailor it to anyone that you come in contact with.
Okay, interesting. And then you offer a wide variety of different stuff. You want to go into some of the classes that you do offer?
Yes. So I like to teach the average shooter. And if you think about how many Americans don't have firearms training, there's a lot of them, right?
Oh, yeah.
But there's a lot of people, so the level of experience that I have it with advanced shooters. But those are not the types of people that I want to teach, because when people are advanced and they have a lot of training, sometimes they have a lot of bad habits, but they're kind of stuck in their ways. Mm-hmm. So I want to take someone who doesn't have a lot of experience, and I want to teach them the right way. But then I want them to just build upon that foundation. So I do concealed carry classes for Florida, intro to pistol classes. And the intro to pistol class is a sitting in the classroom for 2 hours and the student just learning about the firearm, learning the mechanics, learning all of that. And then the last hour of the class, we actually go to the range and shoot. I offer a gun buying consult because people need to know exactly what they need to buy. Like, what are their needs? Is it for hunting? Is it for concealed carry or home protection? Because it's not a one-size-fits-all, and there's different calibers for different things. Right. And then I also do kids classes. I am very, very passionate about teaching kids because they're the future, and we need for them to be able to fight for our Second Amendment rights. But we also have people that are coming into the schools with ill intent. So I want to teach kids to where if they ever encounter a gun, they have the knowledge to properly handle it if they need to, or they know what to say and what to do.
Right. Because
there's a lot of parents who don't have the knowledge, so they can't teach their kids the proper gun handling skills if they don't know.
Right. And even in a defensive, or I guess defensive is the wrong word, I guess even in a defenseless almost situation, like if we're talking about a situation like a school, I've got to think that even though you've got that person with ill intent, I hate calling them shooters at all, but that person with ill intent going into the school, and even though those kids are not armed, I've got to think that those kids that have an understanding, a real world understanding of firearms and what's capable and how they work and all this other stuff, probably, I don't know that it's a huge advantage, but they probably have a little better advantage on the whole, the idea of taking cover and evading and escaping and all of that. Would you disagree with that at all?
No, I agree with it, and I look at it in the fact of, a lot of parents don't want to teach their kids because they want someone else to come save their kids, right? But think about it in this scenario. If there's two gunmen, right? If something happens to one gunman and there's a gun, and if you need it to defend yourself, why wouldn't you want your kid to know how to actually properly handle a gun? Mm-hmm. And maybe they could be the one to stop that shooter.
Right. or just know how many walls you need to put between you and the gunman, right? Or what type
Yeah.
of a barricade, or that's most likely going to be able to stop rounds. If you've ever been out to the range, I mean, drywall is not going to do it, but I mean, if you could get some, a few hard wooden desks or something like that in between, yourself and the gunfire, something along that. I mean, even in Parkland, I believe that wasn't there some students that hid under a Kevlar curtain that was used, I think, that the rifle team used. And when I heard about that, I thought, I mean, that really speaks to the kids that are aware of firearms and their capabilities and all of that they had the presence of mind to say, hey, we hear gunfire, something's going on, let's hide under this, because at least it offers us some type of protection.
Yeah.
Instead of just kind of running out in the open and freaking out. Yeah, with the kids thing, I do want to come back and touch on the kids thing for sure, because that's something that I've looked forward to talking to you, because that's something that I have dealt with, probably not in the same capacities that you deal with the kids, because mine falls more along the lines of shooting sports. But as far as safety and responsibility and confidence and all the other things involved, that's of course the same. But you're really big on doing classes with the family dynamic as well.
Yes, and I think that's very important, because if you think about the way that families are nowadays, the parents are really busy, right? They come in, and then the kids are probably on their phones. Probably the entire family's on their phones, right? How much time do they really get to spend together? So I found that if you're going to do something fun, why not learn a skill together?
Mm-hmm. Right.
So learning how to handle a gun, learning how to shoot, that's an awesome skill that you can use from a young age all the way up until you die. So learning how to shoot, I found it just brings families closer, and they end up finding something that they all enjoy. I haven't encountered a family that's been like, I really don't like this.
Right, and that's a valid point. I mean, we talk a lot of times about if we can just get people to the range, right? And not just get them to the range. I think that's being way too generalized with it, because I know some ranges personally around me that are horrible, and I wouldn't want to send my worst enemy to that range, because it's not the safest place around. But a range with good ROs, with instructors available, or courses like you're talking about, like you offered, that sort of thing. If you can get people that are new, that are maybe not necessarily new, maybe they grew up with hunting, maybe they grew up with things like dad had the shotgun in the closet or behind the door, the revolver in the nightstand drawer or something like that, so they were around firearms a little bit, but they just don't have that hands-on experience. And if you can get people into a safe, controlled environment, most tend to enjoy it. They even if they're anti-gunners, it may not turn them to be pro-gunners, but I think that you see a certain amount of understanding and respect, at least, begin to develop if you can ever get them on a range.
Yeah, and so I want to talk about that. I do private lessons as well. I do supervised range time. I do private lessons, and I had a private lesson yesterday, and the lady had never touched a gun. And her husband, she was a nurse, and her husband's been really trying to get her into guns. And so he showed her some of my videos, and she agreed to come and meet me. And so the very first thing, so I knew she was hesitant, right? The very first thing that I did was just talk to her. I wanted to put her at ease. And then I wanted to learn about her. Did she have any hang-ups? Like, was she scared of guns? And so then I try to relate to people that, guns are just objects. And a lot of people will relate that object to something bad that happened. They'll say, oh, well, a gun killed my cousin, or a gun killed this person. And so I talked to her about, guns don't kill people. Guns are objects. So, I set the gun down and I said, if I were to sit this here, will this ever just move and shoot you? No. But then I think it's also important that people actually learn the mechanics of a gun. So I talked to her about how there has to be a certain amount of rearward pressure in order for this gun to go off. Mm-hmm. So all these things that you're scared about, I want to properly educate you on why you don't need to be scared of this object, you know? Like, people get into car accidents. Are we saying cars are out here killing people? No, we're not saying that.
Right.
But it's the same thing.
Right.
So she had never touched a gun before, and she was very hesitant. And I'll probably post it tomorrow. When she left, she had the biggest smile on her face, and she hugged me, and she's like, you know, you will see me again. And that was just a 1-hour private lesson. Our first 20 minutes was us just talking. But if I would have just brought her in and was like, hey, here's this gun. Do you want to shoot? Let's go to the range. She would not have felt comfortable with me. And I try to coach people through the process because it's very overwhelming. Okay, so I need you to focus on your breathing. I need you to focus on pulling the trigger to the rear. You know, there's just a lot of moving parts that are going on that they have to actively think about. Mm-hmm. So I like to let them know, hey, I'm right here. And when I'm on a range with a student, I let them know I'm right here with you, and all you need to be worried about is me and you. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of people get really hung up on the person beside them, right, how they're shooting, you know, and they're like, well, I'm not shooting as good as that person. So then I reminded her, although she didn't say it, I told her, you know, before we go in here, I don't want you to ever worry about anyone else, because think about if you knew nothing about me, right? I just look like an average female. Mm-hmm. And she's shooting beside me, but I'm shooting better than her. I have 10 years of experience. She had 1 day, but she would compare herself to me.
Sure.
So we talked about it, and I'm very encouraging on the range, like right. Probably a little bit too encouraging. You know, it's like, hey, how do you feel? See, you did really good, and it just builds up their confidence to where, you know, they keep pushing themselves, even though the gun may be heavy or whatever it may be. They just keep pushing themselves and overcoming whatever hang-ups they had.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with all of that. And I mean, that's a sound approach that you're using. We hear it a lot about how, well, you know, they're saying, you know, these anti-gunners or whatever, and, you know, they're just running on emotion. And, you know, I work with a lady, and she hates guns, and, you know, she's just all emotional about it and all this stuff. And while I understand that on one hand, on the other hand, I think what we have to realize is that emotions are a real thing. Whether they're justified or validated is irrelevant. They're real things, and so they have to be addressed in some way. And so I think that's great, the way that you approach that situation, with wanting to sit down, find out, you know, what the problem was behind the, you know, the emotions she was having, try to work through that just a little bit, gain that trust, you know, and then move into, you know, now let's do some hands-on and some familiarization.
And something else that I challenge my students to whenever they first come into a class with me, I challenge them to think about what their why is. Mm-hmm. If they don't know why they want to carry, when they don't want to go to the range and they want to just stay at home on the weekend, they're probably just going to stay home if they don't know what their why is.
Right.
But I share my why with them so that they can relate. And then before I get a student in my class, I talk to them. Mm-hmm. So I know things about them. So I can go, okay, so my why is my children, you know, or my why is I don't never want to be caught slipping. As a female, I'm at a disadvantage. Mm-hmm. I'm only 5'2". So if there were a man that was even just someone who's stronger than me, but what if someone's on drugs? Mm-hmm. Exactly. You know, they're going to overpower me, and I don't ever want to get caught slipping because I have a family that would be devastated if I wasn't here. Mm-hmm. And that's just not something that I want to do to them because I wanted to leave my gun at home or because I didn't want to challenge myself and get training.
Mm-hmm. Right. Now, do you have people that come into the class with or maybe the basic class or something like that, and they're just looking for the familiarization. Maybe, you know, they've got one for home defense, or they're considering that. They're not really to the level of looking to carry yet. You got people that just come in on that level.
And I tell people, like, so I call it a journey. Like, the first step is a concealed class. I have a lot of people who don't have a gun. They just want to take a class. And in the class, I throw so much at them, and they're like, I never thought of that. I need to buy a gun. Like, I'm so glad that I took this class. This class was absolutely worth it.
So they come They come in for the education, and you turn them. Basically, is how that works.
Yes. Because you don't know what you don't know. So let's just be honest. So they don't know that, because a lot of people are not aware of things like situational awareness. And you talking to someone about situational awareness and just breaking down like the small things to them, they're like, oh, I never thought about that. Everybody has a route to work. Everybody has a routine. And I'll break it down to people in my class. I'll tell them there's one person in their life that knows their routine, and they have no idea that person knows their routine. You know, so it's, for me, it's on my way to work. Is there a certain car that I see in traffic every day? Or if I stop at a certain place to get a coffee, am I seeing certain people multiple times throughout the week? Right. So does someone know every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, you stop at Starbucks to get a coffee at 7 o'clock? Those are things that people don't need to know about you, because that makes you a soft target.
Yeah, agreed. Now moving into the youth thing, the kid thing here for a little bit. How young do you go down with your training? How far down do you go as far as age?
So I have the NRA Eddie the Eagle program. I recommend to teach kids once they enter school age, but it all goes off of the level of maturity.
Absolutely.
Obviously, when they're just like pre-K, 4 or 5 year old kindergarten, whatever it may be, I'm going to talk to them on their level. And it's going to be, okay, so do you see this? If mommy has this in her purse, you know, you never go on like things like that. Or if you are at the park, if you're at a friend's house. So everything is tailored to their level. So I recommend that parents educate their children as soon as, one, they see that they start to have an interest in what their parents are carrying, or two, once they actually hit school age.
Right. Yeah, I think it's once curiosity starts to develop. That's usually the benchmark that when I'm talking to people, that I usually go by. I usually don't get, other than friends and family and stuff like that, I usually don't get to coach or instruct or do anything until the kiddo is like 8 years old. And honestly, I think it needs to start way before then. At least like you're talking about, the safety, the familiarization, removing the curiosity and the stigma and stuff like that. So there's a lot of things that I recommend is young enough to be able to wear eye and ear pro, right? Or old enough, I should say, to be able to wear eye and ear pro. Totally okay with taking those kiddos to the range, letting them kids be a part of the process post targets, stuff like that. I mean, 3-4 years old, something like that is probably too young, in my opinion, to be putting behind a real firearm. You could certainly do things, and we do that here at the house with the grandbabies. I mean, we play around with Nerf, for example, but we don't shoot each other. You know, I make little reactive targets and things like that, and so, you know, finger off the trigger and point in a safe direction, and there's all the safety things even with Nerf that I try to instill at that young age. But yeah, just removing that stigma, and then I think you're right. Once you start getting, for every kid, there's going to be that level of maturity. You're going to have 5-year-olds that are, you know, mature enough that you could definitely put them on, you know, a 22 Cricket or Rascal rifle or something like that, and then others that there's no chance. We don't want them anywhere close. Even a BB gun or a pellet gun would be a dangerous proposition. For those kiddos, they still got some growing up to do. So, as far as ages that you go through with actual firearm and the firearms that you use, for the kiddos, do you switch down to, depending on the age, do you have access to 22s and stuff you use for them, or do you prefer to go with the center fire, the larger caliber stuff?
I go 22, and I don't just use 22 for kids. I use 22 to someone who may be scared. They have, or maybe they don't have a lot of hand strength. They're kind of weak. Mm-hmm. I use that to graduate them to maybe something bigger, but definitely kids start with a 22, and then sometimes they just have a curiosity and they want to shoot something like a heavier caliber, and I'll do that as well because I want them to know what it feels like.
Sure.
Like, everything's not going to have this light recoil.
Right. Now with the 22s, what specifically, what are some of the 22s that you use?
I have a Firefly.
Okay.
And I definitely like to use that.
That's similar to a SIG, correct?
I didn't hear you.
I said that's similar to a SIG, or is that a SIG?
Yes. Yeah, I think it's like a knockoff.
Yeah, it looks like a SIG though, if I remember correctly. Yeah.
Yeah, but for that, it's something that I'm right there on them. And not that I'm holding it for them, but there's been times, like I had a time where I was teaching a autistic child, mm-hmm. and with his parents' permission, I literally was behind him, and my hand was holding the gun, but no one would have ever taught him because they would have been frightened of what he would have done or how he would have reacted to it. Mm-hmm. And even his parents, at first, they were like, well, what do you think, or will you do this? And I'm like, sure, like I'm control, like, he can't take that out of my hands, Mm-hmm. So it was in his hands, but my hands were over his hands. And he absolutely enjoyed it.
Sure.
It was something that he really loved, and he would have never had that opportunity before. Mm-hmm. So if kids need it, I'm right there, like, to hold it with them. Mm-hmm. And then I'll just, slowly start to kind of take my hands away. And then it's like, look what you did all by yourself.
Right, yeah. It's kind of like the old way that you almost teach everybody to ride a bicycle, right? You kind of run along behind them, holding the seat, and eventually you're holding them, and then you're holding the seat, and eventually you just let go, and they're kind of doing it on their own. Yeah, I mean, I tend to use that approach as well. A lot of times I will hold or guide, usually with them at their wrists. That way they're actually holding the weight of the firearm, because I think that's important that they get used to that. Some of them, certainly, if you're talking smaller kids, it's a little important for them to understand the weight. They really got to build that muscle mass. And with our program, we do archery and a lot of other stuff. So archery really helps with the arm strength and stuff like that to be able to handle the firearms later on. But we use bags a lot too. Do you use any bags and let them rest their wrists and that sort of thing on bags?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, that probably could even work for an adult. But I find that with kids, especially just starting out, I don't know, they really like those bags. It really, they're able to control everything better. They don't have to worry about holding the firearm up. They don't have to worry about it. A lot of times we do it from the sitting position even. At a table, so they don't get tired nearly as quick, and that's certainly an issue that you run into. It sounds like most of your courses and your classes, whether it's adults or kids or whatever, are fairly short courses, correct?
Yes. I don't like to throw too much on people at one time, because for the average person who doesn't have the experience, that's an overload. Mm-hmm. They're learning all of this, and then they're having to apply it, and then you start to lose people's attention if you have them in a class too long. Mm-hmm. Right. And then people's hands start to get tired if they're shooting for too long. So my classes are not too long, but then I also add other classes. So I like to suggest that they come back, and I like to personalize classes. Not everybody has the same goals. Not everybody has the same needs. So if I do a private class, I have private classes 3-hour block or 1 hour or 2 hour, and you tell me what you need and I'll build a class for you. So if someone's like, yeah, I don't need your class, maybe my wife can take your class. I can promise you anyone can benefit from a class with me. So a lot of people don't ever do training with elevated heart rate.
Mm-hmm.
So it's, have you ever trained like that? No? Okay, well, maybe you should try to do that, because in a real life situation where there's an active threat, your heart rate's going to be elevated.
Mm-hmm.
Your
Right.
palms may be sweaty. So what are you going to do?
Right.
Have you ever trained like that? Because if you've never trained like that, then you don't know what you're going to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the more you train in situations like that, you spoke about confidence earlier, and the more confidence is a huge key. It's a huge key, and I mean, and especially when you're talking about just outside the realm of even firearm use, confidence plays such a huge role in surviving at all. Period. Right, in this world. I mean, it's huge. So, I mean, if you're confident in your abilities, you're confident in and I think you were right when you hit on earlier, choosing the right firearm for you for that particular purpose and application. That instills confidence in your firearm, which is important. And as you build those things up, I don't know. I just think, to me, I always talk to groups and stuff, and they talk about when you're working with these kids and everything, and I'm sure it's the same with adults. And they ask the one value or the one skill or goal or whatever it might be. That seems to always be the one that I come back to. Is I want to, whoever I'm working with, I want to build their confidence. I want them to be confident, not cocky. That's dangerous, but confident.
I know, right?
With that, and I think the more you build that confidence, the more that you start to challenge yourself as well, which is really important for those students.
But think about, so a lot of people think I'm a gun nut. I'm absolutely not a gun nut. There's plenty of other things that I would spend my money on. I know the necessity of firearms. I know the necessity of training, but the way that people should look at being a responsible gun owner, these things can apply to your everyday life. Like, if you're confident in your job, you're probably going to attract more people. You're probably going to get put on more projects, and you're probably doing a lot better job than everybody else, right? Mm-hmm. Or if you're confident as a husband, as a wife, or as a friend, more people want to be around you. Mm-hmm. So, as a shooter or someone in the firearms community, once you build that confidence, you're going to be able to do any and everything, because for me, there was a lot of times where I wasn't confident. And you could read it all over my face.
Right.
And that's what I tell my shooters. If you're not confident, someone can read that, and they're probably just going to take the gun from you.
Right. Yeah, and we certainly, that's way counterproductive. So, and it's baby steps in building that confidence. It really is. Build that confidence and just step up to the next level and run from there. Well, we've had a great chat. It appears, Skip. We're kind of up against the clock now, so I think we've covered most of it. I mean, unless you can think of anything that you just have to throw out there before we leave. Definitely need to throw out how to get in touch with you.
Yeah, so the best way to get in touch with me, you can shoot me an email, and you can email me at skipstacticalsolutions@gmail.com. You can always go to my website, which is skipstacticalsolutions.com, and just hit the contact me button while you're on my website. Check it out. Let me know what you think. I will love your feedback. I also have a podcast where you can learn more about me and just follow up on some of the things that I'm talking about. And my podcast is called Skip's Tactical Solutions, and I have a YouTube channel as well. I try to put out as much education as I can, because I feel like there's enough people showing you how cool they can shoot, and I'm way beyond that. I want to actually give people value. You watching me shoot isn't bringing you value, because that's not even building your confidence, because you may feel like I'm at a level above you. Mm-hmm. But I want to give you tips, and I want to help you along your journey to make you a better concealed carry holder, a better shooter, a better person in general, so that when you do come in contact with someone or you do feel like you need to use your firearm, that you're confident in that because I've given you value.
Mm-hmm. Right. Now with I'm a bad host, right? Because I've got talking about the podcast written down on my notes, and we completely did gloss over that. But you hit on it. Where you do the podcast on Instagram, correct?
No, so I do a live stream on Instagram.
Uh-huh. Oh, okay.
Yeah, I do a Facebook and Instagram live every month, the first Thursday of the month.
First Thursday of the month. Okay. And the podcast is different than those?
Yes.
Okay.
So I do a completely different thing, and I do a podcast, and my podcast comes out every other Monday, and you could go to skipstacticalsolutions.com/Libsyn, or you could just go to your podcast player, and the name of the podcast is Skip's Tactical Solutions. So it's in Spotify, iTunes, it's everywhere. Or you could just go to my YouTube channel, and it's on my YouTube channel.
Thank you for joining in on another Firearm Friday. Don't forget to log on to CloverTac.com. There you'll find our social media links, the blog, cool swag, and more. If you'd like to help support our projects and take advantage of some extra perks, you can do so over on Patreon at patreon.com/CloverTac. Have a great weekend.